Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Cho. U.S. President Joe Biden signed the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, so-called NDAA, which took effect immediately. The act focuses on expanding U.S. Taiwan military cooperation, establishing extensive training programs for the Taiwanese military, and expediting arms sale to Taiwan. What is the significance of the NDAA coming into effect before the Taiwan elections? Joining us today are Lai I-Chung, Prospect Foundation President, and Alex Huang, Kuomintang International Affairs Director and a representative to the United States. A very warm welcome to both on the show. Okay. Before the end of 2023, President Biden signed the NDAA, directing funding towards national security programs across the U.S. Departments of Defense, Departments of Energy, State Departments, and various intelligence agencies. The allocation reaches a record $886 billion, boosting the U.S. national security budget by 3%. A key highlight is that the initiation of the comprehensive military training program for Taiwan. So, President Lai, so how does the enactment of the NDAA affect the regional experiencing geopolitical tension? Could you give us an overview of this?
I believe that if you look at this NDAA, this act and allocation of the budget, you could find that in terms of Asia, they are focused about the Taiwan, about the China, and also especially AUKUS, and also in the Indo-Pacific Command, the operational budget for it, as well as the new budget for the Indo-Pacific Command for the Indo-Pacific Campaign Initiative. So those are the important issues that in terms of operation, how especially the Department of Defense will be able to operate. And we all know that U.S. military forces is the most important vehicle in shaping the Indo-Pacific security environment in face of the Chinese threat. So that the adequate funding as well as the adequate the resources allocation, those are very important for the regional country to see whether the United States not only they can talk the talk, but they can also walk the walk.
Professor Huang, actually the budget is a record high, 886 billion, which was, much more than the previous year. We know that this bill is regularly passed pretty much like every year since 2019. But could you tell our audience that what's the significance of this budget scale?
Yeah, I think a budget increase, defense budget increase has been expected along the way since we have a lot of geopolitical challenges around the world, from Europe to the Middle East and to the Indo-Pacific region. So I think the policy community, think tank community, have already assumed that the United States or the Biden administration will increase defense budget. Of course, 886 billion, it's a record high. And it gives us a highlight of the focus of the defense investment and spending. I believe that it shows that the resolve of the United States to maintain a strong deterrence capability around the world, and I believe that the United States will continue to build forces that can have global vision and global reach.
Well, specifically NDAA, my follow-up for Professor Huang is that the NDAA emphasizes U.S. investments in developing submarines, warships, military aircraft, tanks, and long-range artillery, aiming at sustained U.S. military dominance, as always. Could this prompt another arms race, say, between the two great powers, China and the United States?
Well, if we argue from another angle, there will be people in the United States believe that they were pushed by other countries' build-up, so they need to reinforce their new acquisition. That's one point. The other is that we have to understand that the United States, most of the platforms have been, in service for decades. So this is about time. Many retired admirals and generals had advocated that they should have done that more than 10 years ago. So personally, from my personal view as a military expert, I think the United States is behind in terms of platform modernization because there are new technology available and many other competitors are building new platforms. So the United States needs to catch up.
We know that some of the U.S. aircraft carriers has been quite old. And like what you said, the number of the naval force might be, if in terms of the number, might be behind a little bit. So maybe President Lai, you can add up to this. And so what's the meaning of this budget, especially regarding this record scale? In terms of the arms sale or the competition between the China and the United States?
I think if you look at the Chinese military build-up in the last 10 to 15 years, not just that the budget has the average about a double-digit increase every year, but also their new platform and into the water, into the air, that how China developed and put there. You could see that the United States actually in terms of the military scale is not really up to the kind of increase China has put up in both sea and in air. So that right now the United States this year, the increase of the budget to a certain extent is to try to rebalance what we say as the unbalanced, the U.S. China, the military posture in the Indo-Pacific. And also we have to know that the United States, this NDAA is not just about Indo-Pacific. It's a global Navy, it's a global military. So they also have their posture in the Europe, which they are facing the war in Ukraine. But also they have their forces right now in the Middle East, in which the Israel and Hamas war is waging, it's going on. So the increase in Indo-Pacific and the focus on that, I can say it's a very modest increase. So that in my view, I think people will argue for more increase rather than less increase for the U.S. to be able to meet a challenge from China in this region.
A follow-up for President is that could you kind of help us to understand the CCP or the PLA specifically in response to this budget increase in military spending on the parts of the United States, because we know that Xi Jinping is quite ambitious in this, and help us understanding this part particularly. And the second question is that you mentioned that the NDAA is not only spent in Asia but also in Europe and even in the Middle East. We also know that China and also the PLA project its military force not only in the Taiwan Strait but also in these areas. And how will the United States compete with PLA in Europe and even the Middle East? In terms of military
the last question is much easier to answer because although China has the global ambition, but its presence in both Europe and in the Middle East is very limited. Yes, China has a military base in Djibouti. But the Chinese presence over there is not comparable to what the United States, UK, or France, even in, especially just any one of those nations, not those nations combined. And Chinese presence in the Europe is also very limited, only through the China and the Russia, the joint exercises. You could say that all the increase in Chinese military basically it is in Indo-Pacific, especially toward Taiwan, and to a lesser extent toward South China Sea. So that's why when we talk about the Chinese military increase, the resources and the asset allocations in this region, and how China dumped into those areas, we do know that in the last like 10 years, almost every month we saw the new ship from China, new destroyer, enter the water, and China already has 3 aircraft carrier. It's also building the 4th one, but also very much focused in the East China Sea, South China Sea, and Taiwan Straits. So we are talking about a huge military asset in such a small area. Right. In comparison, United States is spreading all over the world, Europe, Atlantic Oceans, the Middle East, even in the Pacific, and also the U.S. has its presence in the Latin America. Right. So that the imbalance in the Indo-Pacific is really in Chinese favor. And so that is why I think the United States right now try to tip the balance back to uneven what was leg up in the previous 2 decades. That's going to be very important for the country in this region.
Okay, that's interesting. Professor, do you agree with President's argument that the United States pretty much put all the attention on the Indo-Pacific, specifically in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and therefore, spend more in this region?
This is an issue. If we go to the United States Congress, you will hear clearly the debate among their members. A lot of people criticize that the United States has spent too much on Ukraine, and their true enemy is actually the People's Republic of China, so they should move the funding more to the Indo-Pacific region. I think the resources that the United States Congress is now willing to put into a particular region, of course, Indo-Pacific region is the number one, because they do see that China is a threat to the United States interests.
Actually, President, the NDAA requires the U.S. Secretary of Defense to submit a report to the Congress every 6 months, outlining China's weapon upgrades, procurement, and military actions in Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and South China Sea. So with such a precise and detailed monitoring, could the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea be considered the most critical regions in 2024?
Definitely is. And also I think that this requirement also is significant in 2 parts. First of all, usually the DOD has an annual POA report every year. But this report actually required the DOD to submit it twice a year, so that the frequency is much higher. That also means that the U.S. really wanted to track the development of China military and assets in those areas in a much closer fashion. Another thing is that it's specified, very specific about Chinese military assets and resources spent in the Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, and the East China Sea. That also means that those areas are considered to be the critical area in terms of the United States competition vis-a-vis China. And that area also happens to be the country of the first island chain. So I think that there's a very specific the focus about how to maintain the balance of power within the first island chain. And we do know that about the year 2010 or 12, the United States talk about how that China has its own A2AD, anti-access area denial strategies. But now with the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, the U.S. is actually developing its own A2AD strategy toward China by placing its military, especially from the Marine, to spread out distributions around the first island chain islands, so that to prevent China from dominating inside the first island chain and make that as a contested area.
Well, I mean, the follow-up question is kind of technical, is that do you think that in this coming year, actually 2024, whether it's naval force, air force, or the marine from the United States, is more needed in the aforementioned areas, South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, even Southeast Asia, in order to counter the influence of China?
I think right now the United States is moving every resources available. It's not like what it did in the past, like usually relies on the Navy and the Air Force. Right now the Marine plays a very important part of the work. And the Marine also adjusts its role from during the War on Terror, that Marine was a offensive forces to take the enemy. But right now, Marine is more about the defense on the island, which is basically what the Marines do. So the Marine itself, under the new terms of the modernizations and the transformations, back to their traditional role, and they will also associate with the equipment that's needed for those missions. So that's what we're going to see about the Marine transformation here in this area. And the Navy, then the debate will be, would the United States will also devote the resources into building more ships? I think that will be a little bit complicated, because the U.S. does not have the enough production line to facilitate that transformation. And also, United States is also working with other nations, especially with Australia in this regard, about building the Australian nuclear-powered submarine capabilities. So that is another areas of the concern. But I think that the NDA this time, if we look at the development, we could see the investment, especially on the marine part.
Professor, you are also a military expert, so could you kind of add up to what the President's comments or analysis of the requirements for more weapons, more personnel and resources in this regard?
If we spend time and read the remarks given by the military leaders who recently left their military service, retired from the Indo-Pacific Command, they would give you a long list of things that need to be fixed, to be built, and to be added. In terms of the intervals of deployment, in terms of the logistics. I read those recommendations carefully and tried to compare their remarks with the actual activities and challenges that they have to perform, like freedom of navigation operations or more patrol in the Indo-Pacific region. I think they also need to take care of their personnel as well. So it's expected that this Indo-Pacific focused authorization bill will definitely be boosted in the next year, in 2024.
Okay. In a recent NDAA signing, $14.7 billion is allocated to the 2024 Pacific Deterrence Initiative and the creation of the Indo-Pacific Campaigning Initiative. This funding enables the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command to enhance the frequency and the magnitude of its operations, backed by a $1.3 billion operational budget, with the objective of deterring Beijing. This act also includes a provision that bars the Pentagon from purchasing products from certain Chinese battery manufacturers. I think this is new to us. So the United States is boosting the Indo-Pacific Command's budget to deter Beijing. Raises question about the potential action involved. Are they confined to merely intensifying exercise and patrols? Can such measures effectively deter threats? Specifically, we talk about the ban on buying stuff from the Chinese manufacturer, especially the battery companies. So what's your analysis or observation of this?
I think first of all, regarding the particularly mentioned to lower the Chinese presence in the U.S. military equipment. That means that the United States is very concerned about the possible liabilities of the U.S. weaponry system should they be breached by the China using the equipment of the strong Chinese presence. Then this act is basically trying to really put the money and to monitor the whole problem in it. And also, when we look at the Indo-Pacific, like I think Pacific Deterrence Initiative is actually in the Section 1302, because it stated that Section 1302 authorizing extension of PDI, Pacific Deterrence Initiative, through year 2026. And that itself, not just about year 2024, basically means that's a multi-year project. And that also means that there's a very clear commitment as a very bipartisan support for enhancing the PDI, its capability and its fruition to see it through. And also we look at the Indo-Pacific Campaign Initiative. That's in Section 1304. Just two sections before under the PDI, and that requires a briefing report in year 2024 for the campaign, basically, which means that it is more of a political dimension of this development. So that we could see in this report not just about the military, but also the military combined with the political as well as a narrative campaign in which the United States found out that the Chinese is very good in and changing the narrative, and the U.S. need to counter that.
Right, so it's more about the propaganda, if you will, in this way, not only in terms of material, the concrete stuff. What about you, Professor? Still my question, I'm still curious about the bars, the Pentagon, bars the Pentagon from purchasing products from certain Chinese battery manufacturers. What does that mean?
I think, number one, it proves that a very clear, evidence that the congressional members try to exercise their influence involving, directions of the spending and focused on their policy. Secondly, I would say that it's a little bit political because we all know that the sentiment on Capitol Hill, they have a very strong, anti-China or China suspicious attitude. That's number two. Number three is that I believe that for sensitive equipment and systems, it is pretty natural that the United States needs to be very vigilant about using the Chinese products in order to protect its own national and operational security.
Well, actually, the reports, associated with the NDAA, talks about the Indo-Pacific Campaign Initiative. My question for President is that, do you see anything new out of this term compared with, say, the first term when Biden, although not Biden is going for the second term, jump in the election, or even as opposed to when Donald Trump was in office?
I think there's definitely differences here because in the past, when we talk about narrative competition between U.S. and China, the United States basically allocates the responsibility and the resources to the State Department, for example. So in State Department, there's a global engagement center, which basically try to monitor and attract, and to a certain extent, try to devise a narrative to counter the Chinese narrative campaign. But now we are seeing this Indo-Pacific Campaign Initiative in the Department of Defense. That also means that in the DoD, when they talk about the countering Chinese campaign, the military will also take the certain action that's in the past that have been basically the political and the diplomacy work. But I think this is also recognition of the United States, knowing that in China, not just about the espionage, but also the political warfare, in which that's also play a very important part in the PLA. Now the U.S. side also need to come out with a similar action narrative as well as organ to exercise its own counter political warfare about China.
Well, actually, following the second meeting between Biden and Xi, there was a global perception of a potential softening in U.S.-China relations, and indeed, the past month has seen relatively mild interaction between the two presidents from China and the United States. Given this context, what's the significance of the NDAA signing on the evolving dynamics of U.S.-China relations? Professor?
I think it's quite clear that the United States play, the game with both hands. One is strengthening their deterrence, build up their capability. The other is assurances that making sure that they have sent the political signal that if China comply or if the adversary would not go across the line, that they would not be punished. So I think they want to send a message that a credible deterrence must include assurance as well. And I see President Biden's recent move, actually since last year, and is trying to lower, reduce the threat, and reduce the probability of unintended incident and make sure that the peace and stability can be maintained while buying time to build up the American operational capability and capacity.
the two-hand approach by Biden. Do you agree with this kind of assessment?
I think the two hands, not just Biden himself, but also the Xi Jinping play as well.
Okay.
First of all, if you look at the right after the Biden-Xi's meeting, Chinese action about Taiwan, also in South China Sea toward Philippines, go unhindered, and even in some day that Chinese action, military harassment against Taiwan, also reached quite the higher level in terms of the scale. And its competition and the confrontation with the Philippines actually increase rather than decrease. So that in China, I think Xi also plays both hands. In the face of the United States, China said that we do not want to have a war with you, and so is the Biden himself toward China. But for the United States, after the shaking hands and the smiling, Biden with Xi Jinping, the U.S. also announced its arms sale to Taiwan package, as well as the U.S. action, especially AUKUS with other nations. So that I think the both sides would not want this relationship to go sour at this moment, but they also prepare in terms of their own individual field that how to enhance their capability for the competition. Both are playing the similar game.
Final question for both. Do you guys think that 2024, the Taiwan Strait is better for the Taiwan security or less?
China right now is lacking the confidence, so that how the Xi Jinping would like to compensate for the lack of confidence by doing something more on Taiwan or to other nations, I think that's something we need to watch out.
Professor?
I think there is a room for relaxation. However, we all know that not only Taiwan election, but the United States is getting into its presidential election cycle. China needs to be very, very careful if they increase their military operations in the Western Pacific, because it may trigger a greater discussion during the presidential debate in the United States that may not do China any good.
Okay. Professor Huang, President Lai, thank you for the great insights. Although the NDAA is a standard bill passed by Congress every year, the actual scope of this year's measure is highly impactful. Our guest speakers help us to understand how the 2024 NDAA will shape the Indo-Pacific dynamic, especially Taiwan Strait. Do you like this episode? Leave us a message and subscribe to Taiwan Talks. See you soon.